Okay, so I'm going to take you through the setup for the water droplets. The camera I'm using is an EOS R6, a Canon camera, and basically we've got that linked up to a SplashArt kit, which is this little device here, and I'll go through that in a moment. That has a cable running to the shutter release connection on the camera, and also it's got a connection that runs up to this stand and onto the solenoid of the valve that's connected here on the actual cylinder the water's put in. And that basically, when you press the button on the SplashArt kit, you'll see that it releases the water. It also fires the Canon camera, so it fires the camera, and because I've also got my strobes set up, which I'll show you how they're set up in a moment. So we've got the trigger for the strobes set on the camera as well, so when we fire the shot, automatically the strobes go off. Now you can use, there's nothing wrong with using flash guns for this, normal flashes. If you use flash guns, they must be on the lowest power, and you need to get them set up so that they're really close to the subject, and you can either shine them on the background, or, as I'm going to explain, a better technique is to actually use some diffusion material. So you can see I've got a big setup here. We've got the diffusion material in the background. You don't need it that big, obviously it just needs to be the surface to cover the shot that you're taking, which isn't that big. But behind here I've got two strobes set up, and they've both got gels on there. They're on their lowest power also. So the reason you get them on the lowest power, whether you're using flash or the strobes, is because it's not the shutter release speed that actually captures the image. When you're using flash, it's the duration of the flash that captures the image. So it doesn't matter what speed you're set on with your camera, as long as everything's black when you take a picture without the flash. The only thing that comes into play is the flash lighting that's set off when you press the shutter button. So therefore, with these set on their lowest power, you'll get a very short duration of flash, and that's probably equal to about 1,000, 2,000 of a second, or in some cases some flash even more, up to 8,000 of a second, depending on the type of flasher you've got. So, but it will only do that on the very lowest power. That's the shortest duration of light that it gives out, and that captures then the falling water. Now I have got some of the strobe lights which I use probably more so than these. These are my old ones. The other ones have got a battery controlled ones, and they're great and nice and portable, but for some reason the duration isn't as short. I can use high speed sync, which I don't want to use. I want to use manual settings. So it's just easier to use these lights. They've got a quicker burst rate when they fire the flash, and they're quite cheap as well, some of the cheaper flashes, strobe lights. Okay, so that's the lighting setup, but that goes through the diffusion material. That also is important. It's double folded, that, and you can get diffusion material for making scrims. That's called a scrim. So we've got diffusion material set up on a frame, and we're shooting through that, so that's scrim lighting. And the diffusion material, I think I got that on Amazon. If you look up diffusion material or scrims, you can buy that on there, and it's not too expensive. It's also very useful, and that comes in big long lengths, so you get a standard width, but you can get it quite long. So it's really useful, especially for me doing product photography and that type of work. Also portraits, you can do some nice arty shots with portraits as well. And all the creases in there won't show up because the light's going to be that bright, you won't see the creases in there, so that will all be diffused. And it's not really for a background. The screen is just to throw the light. So what happens when the light hits that, it spreads the light over a bigger surface area, and that just gives you nicer lighting. And also that background, we obviously need something there, because we don't want a bare light coming into the water. You'll get flare on your camera and all that, so that prevents that. And it's also the best way of colouring the water, because we don't need to colour the actual water. The light does that for us. So using the gels is just a much easier way of actually colouring the water than adding additives. And when you add additives, it falls into the other water and it all starts mixing up, and you know, it's a bit of a pain. So lighting is much better to use. But if you use it in this way, what you avoid is the sharp highlights on the water. If you've got flashes that are hitting the water direct, what you then get are really harsh highlights, and it's really nasty. So it just burns out the colour. Another thing is to get some highlight into your water splash art. Obviously water is just a reflection, so when it hits the water and bounces up, it catches any light in the air and it reflects that light. So it's just like a little mirror. And you wouldn't get much contrast unless you've got a large black area. And that's why I've got all this black around here. That will give better contrast in the water. It will pick up that black area and reflect the black. So that's quite important to get the best detail in the image. You want some black around so it picks up that in the reflection. Okay, so that said, let's just go on now. Camera settings. I have got a standard lens on here, but we need to be close, and I'm probably not close enough really. I would probably go a bit further than this, but I haven't set up all my macro lenses and whatever. But I have got an extension tube on this. There's a converter on this because this is an old EF lens, but it's just a standard lens. It's a 24-70. When I usually shoot, I use a 100 macro lens and put more extension tubes on to get closer. The trouble is with getting closer is, of course, you're getting water splashing, and that can get on your lens. So always have handy some lens cleaning material. You know, so I use wipes on that. So I've always got a bag there of lens cleaning material. Should that happen, I'm a bit further away, so it's not too bad at the moment. But if you're further in, then you will get that. You've got to, and that's why I don't use additives in the water. I just use water. If you do milk shots, it's a bit more nasty. You're getting milk on your lens. It's a bit more awkward to get off. So, you know, you've got to be a little bit careful. What you could do is use a clear filter and screw that over your lens to protect it. That would probably be a good idea. I never do that, but it would be a good idea. I'll just clean it off basically. Okay, so the camera settings. Now, as I've got the flash on the lowest setting, it helps to use an higher ISO than 100, which is your normal settings. So I use around 200. I think on this I've got 320. So it just helps the lights a little bit to get the exposure. You can always adjust that to whatever. Your f-stop, really you want to try, if you're working close, you get much less depth of field, obviously, especially using macro lenses and extension tubes. So I'm working at f18 in this case, and you need to experiment. Depends on your type of camera. This is full frame, so f18 I can get that depth of field. With a smaller sensor camera, it's probably a bit easier. So if you've got a crop sensor, it's much easier to get a bit more in focus. And if you're using micro four thirds, even better, you'll get more in focus with that. So, you know, any camera you can use, it doesn't really matter, but you need to think about your settings. So if you're needing more light, say with a smaller sensor, you could probably go down to f10, but I wouldn't go below that. You know, experiment, because when you get the splash and you get the crest on top of the splash, you want the full depth to be able to capture that. Okay, so that is basically it. As I said, we've got all the cables set up. Now the next thing to do is to focus. Now, camera settings as well. Okay, if you've got a mirrorless camera, fine. It is better actually to have a mirrorless for this work, but it's not a necessity. But the beauty of a mirrorless camera is it hasn't got the mirror to flip up. And when you're using a camera and you're using live mode, you could not use live mode for these shots unless you've got a digital camera. And the reason for that is digital mode really slows down the duration of the time when you press the button to when it sets off the flash. So you'd miss it. There is compensation on here that allows you to turn this dial here, and it will compensate the speed that the camera goes off. However, it still won't capture it if you're using live mode or if your mirror isn't flipped up. So important, if you've got DSLR, flip up the mirror. So you'll see in your settings how to do that. So the mirror should be locked up. And that sometimes means you've got to take 2 shots as well. So you press the shutter release and that flips the mirror up, then you press it again to actually take the photo. So remember that, you won't get a shot on your first one, it'll be a blank image. And on the second one, it will then flip the mirror and take the shot. Well, flip the mirror first, sorry, and then when you press it again, it will take the shot. So you need to press it twice. With a mirrorless camera, you haven't got the mirror there, so you get much more of a speedy reaction for when you press the button, and you shouldn't have a problem. And in fact, that dial, in my case, for the compensation, is turned all the way down, because I know that I'm going to be able to capture the shot instantly. It's a lot of working out with these dials though, so let's just have a quick look at the dials. This one, the first one at the top with the SplashArt, that one controls the size of the first droplet, and obviously the size as well controls the speed that it actually comes down. So the second one is the delay between the 2 droplets that it throws out, and the second one is the size of the second droplet. So we've got 2 that do the size of the 2 droplets, and the one in the centre is the duration between the 2 falling. And the other one at the bottom, as I've already explained, is the delay between the camera and you pressing the button. You can adjust that. More so for DSLRs, you'll find that useful. But again, you can't use live view if you've got a DSLR. That will delay it too long, and it's best to have the mirror up, or you won't catch the shot. To take the shot, you press the button. Now, the next thing we've got to do is to actually get the focus. Also important is you want to be using manual mode for your focusing. So on your lens, if you've got a switch on there, change it to manual focus. First of all, we need to see where the drops are going. So I'm actually going to trigger this. It'll take a photo, but I'm going to trigger this, and I'm going to say, okay, the drop went here. I'm going to move this forward a little bit, just a little bit, and I'm going to do that again, and I'm looking where the drop went, and it went there, and I'm putting a straw across there. And then what I can do is I can focus on that straw. So I'm going to go down to my focus, I'm going to zoom in on my focus, if I can find the button to do that. Where's it gone? There we go. And now I can adjust the focus, and then just refocus again. Okay, so that's about the position there. So we're in focus. So I can now remove the straw, and we'll take a test shot. So I'm going to press the button on the SplashArt kit, and that will release the water droplet, and there we go. Okay, so I've fine-tuned these settings. I've made the water slightly larger, delay I've kept the same, so I've just increased the size of the droplets. And now we're going to take another shot. As I kick the tripod, that's not a good thing to do. And we've got a result. Okay, so let's just have a look. It's probably hard to see that on there, but I'll put the picture on the screen. And I'm going to adjust the lighting a bit. I need to adjust the blue lighting so that it comes over a bit on that. Okay, so now we're starting to get some spectacular results. Let's play with the settings. You can see those on there. I'll show them on the screen. But we are getting now some great images. Okay, so that's the basics of that machine. Obviously the SplashArt kit. I will put links on for these different things. I'll try and find the different products, such as the material for the background, the SplashArt kit, which you know, you can purchase. There's also Pluto triggers as well, they work okay. I find them a little bit more temperamental with the settings, but you can get some spectacular results because you can drop more than 2 water droplets, which, you know, we will have a play with that sometime and see what I can create, but it's a bit more fiddly. Whereas this SplashArt kit, it's once you learn to understand what the controls do and analyse your picture after you've taken one, a little bit of tweaking with those, and it is really achievable to get shots almost every time. So very good for that, and an excellent piece of build as well. You've got the stand. You can obviously get different options. You can have more than one stand, and there are videos on their site. I tend not to use their videos. I mean, obviously they work for them with the lighting setup, but if you're using small flashes, say, you do need to get them closer, so you'd need, I would probably iron the background so it's not quite so creased, get it closer, shine your lights through that, and you will get much nicer, cleaner images than direct light